I mean, COVID's a great example. Who died of COVID? Old people, people with diseases, people with chronic systemic inflammation, usually at least 2 diseases, and usually on pharmaceuticals. So pharmaceuticals are synthetic outside in, right? It's different than plant medicine. Plant medicine, the body's known how to digest for thousands of years. Plant medicine co-arose with the human anatomy. Synthetic medicine is somewhat new. It's made in the lab, it's chemical, it's different. Okay, so where are we at? More questions. There was a question about the vaccine. I think that kind of ties a little bit into that. I feel like I want to stay away from the vaccine with a 10-foot pole right now. What's the question? Can you address the vaccine? It's very general. I'll try. Janine, did you want to?
I just asked it because I feel like I'm the only one in my circle of influence. I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't feel comfortable getting it, and I feel pressure. But I feel like I've gotten to such a great place with my body that is like I don't want to introduce that toxicity into my body. So that's all. I know it's a touchy subject. I mean,
we can go back to Svoboda's one-liner. Anything poisonous is health-giving to the body if it can be digested. So the fear doesn't have, the stronger you are, the less there is fear, including of the synthetic chemicals. So there's that, but now let's deal with the peer pressure part, because I think that to me is even more interesting. There's so much peer pressure happening right now. It's kind of wild, and it's been going on for a while. And there are a lot of unknowns. We obviously don't have any long-term studies on this vaccine. And there's, to some degree, some people are saying hasn't really been free speech with it in terms of, Monica, I think Monica, you can write a blog post for us on this. Does that sound good? Because I know you've got the research. That I would really appreciate that. Autonomy. There's a lot in yogic scripture, I would say, and it's going to go to me like it's like cross mystical tradition scripture. I'm sure you could find it in every one of them around autonomy, which comes down to ultimately you make your own decisions and you're responsible for yourself and you don't blame others. So with huge levels of autonomy, you're just not susceptible to peer pressure. It becomes a social phenomenon more than anything. It goes into abstraction where you're like, oh, because my people read this news and this news is saying this, and the emotion behind this news is what? What's the core emotion right now with vaccine? If we were to name it.
Fear.
Fear. So fear is vata. Vata craves a controlled and protected environment. So it wants stability. It's between the known and the unknown. It arises because of being in the unknown and being uncomfortable in the unknown rather than in the known. So the vaccine is like, get back into the known. Now I'm safe, right? So, and that's largely appealing to anyone who's rasa, if we bring this back to the conversation, whose rasa is in fear. And I don't want to say like good, bad, ugly. Like I'm really trying to not pass judgment at all, you guys. Like I don't want to fall on like one side of it. I just want to point to like what we have is choice until we don't have choice, right? And to some degree, there's a lot of, I think I've been hearing some conversations on Joe Rogan and whatnot of like, the whole passport, the vaccine passport, where all of a sudden choice might start to get very severely limited. And then it starts to look a little weird. It starts to look a little 1984 to me, little George Orwell throwback, right, Angie? That became popular when you were around. And yeah, I wonder when you read that book. So Autonomy in svadhyaya. So svadhyaya is sva is self. Svastha is autonomy, seated in the self. That's autonomy. Svadhyaya is the study of the self. If you're uncomfortable receiving an injection of something that doesn't have long-term data, and that's where you're landing, I would just firmly land in that. If that's where you're landing, because that's svadhyaya, that's from a deep study of the self. And if then you're an integrated whole or an organism in that, and that's the vibration that you have in your physiology, you're not in fear. And then other people's opinions can kind of bounce out. And I would sort of have a, like, I'm so happy for you sort of response to people of like, I'm so happy there's a vaccine for you. I'm like, and like really mean it, right? Because they're in fear, and that helps, because then people not being in fear is great. And honestly, most people are not willing to address ama, right? Really, like, think of all the people in your life. Like, who wants to have the conversation we had for the first, half an hour here, and really stop buying the stuff at the market that's causing the ahara rasa? Really not stuff their physiology with their emotions, with a food carrier or an alcohol carrier or a whatever carrier, other substance carrier. Or just stop taking in too much of whatever, too much adrenaline addiction, too much internet shopping, too much. Who wants to get off the hamster wheel and really exhale and take a look at, like, who am I? What is this? And, historically, and this used to upset me, I've got to say, like, back when I've heard so many teachers, great teachers, say this over time of, that it can be kind of a frustrating and lonely path, this path. Like the Alex Gray path, what we're talking about, that subtle anatomy, that path of living that, you're in a very, very, very small percentage of people at that point. And so don't expect the norm. Don't expect the norm to have any idea, have any understanding, have a way of understanding, because it has to be developed, right? If you guys all think about it, like, think back a couple years ago, or for some of you a couple months ago, and for some of you a couple decades ago, and like really think back of, like, what of this conversation would I have understood 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or even a few months ago? And how much of this conversation might I understand a year from now? Do we all agree it would be probably different, that our ability to perceive at the vibration that Svoboda's channeling Chirag Samhita might be different with practice, with even more application of mindfulness or of svadhyaya? So that's when, if people are psyched on the vaccine, I'm psyched for them. Like, they're going from chaos back to order, and now they can make more empowered choices, because when you're in chaos, it's okay to be in chaos. This is the cool thing. I think I love Jordan Peterson's work on this in his first book, 12 Rules of Life, because he really nails it there. It's like, basically, the more you can be in order, the more you can extend to chaos. And then what happens is you order the chaos, and now you have more under order. And then you can extend into chaos, because you're orderly, you're in rhythm, you're in the order of the universe. Let me see up here, there's a, where is it? Order, harmony, beauty, happiness, the step down. It's one of the interpretations of the step down of consciousness. First order, then harmony, then beauty, and then the result, the downstream result of living in order is happiness. So if you don't have order, you don't have happiness. Order is, in a way, dynamic harmony, right? Dynamic harmony generates beauty. Just slice open an apple the wrong way and just be like, whoa, that's gorgeous, right? Or pomegranate, and you see the flower of life. I mean, it's like, there's order. Order has harmony. When you study it, you see the beauty. That gives rise to the feeling state of happiness. Happiness is a rasa. Happiness is a rasa that's reflective of being in connection with higher order. So if someone is quite disorderly, and if there's ama, by definition, it's disorganized and disorderly. It's out of harmony. It's out of order with how digestion absorption is supposed to happen. It's out of harmony with how the environment becomes the organism, and the organism becomes environment. This is not clean. This is getting messy. And statistically, we know it's getting messier. So more people that we know, more of our family members, more of our community, more of our friends, more of our kids' friends, more of our parents, more of our friends' parents, like, right? Our communities, right, have ama at a rate that humans have never had ama before, ever, not even close. And when Svoboda wrote this, my guess is in the 80s or 90s, he didn't know, like, I would be reading this in 2021. It needed to be relevant for now, because you can tell in that section, like, ama wasn't the same thing in the 80s and 90s. The food industry hadn't quite become quite so toxic. Technology, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have iPads, we weren't on screens all the time. We were outside more, we were walking more. It's interesting. So if there's ama, there's confusion. If there's confusion, there's lack of order, right? If there's lack of order, there's going to be fear. If there's fear, the person's in the unknown, which means that what they know is smaller. And now the more someone's in the unknown, and we saw this a lot, we're still seeing it. We're still seeing it with suicides. We're still seeing it with depression and anxiety rates going up, is that more people are living in that fear, in the unknown, right? And in the more they're there, the more the whole system breaks down. So the organized known energy becomes smaller. It becomes less. And they have less capacity to draw on. Okay, those are my thoughts on the vaccine.